As I mentioned in the last video, you almost never feel pain in the front of the neck, which is why some of the mischief that they cause or can cause is often misdiagnosed or not even thought of because you don't feel the pain here. Now we're going to find where those muscles are and what to do about them. So first, the sternocleidomastoid, SCM for short, and as I mentioned, that does not cause numbness in the arm. It does cause other things that I mentioned in the last video, but a few other things that they can cause that I didn't mention would be double vision, blurred vision, pain around the eye sockets, nausea, car sickness, seasickness, and sometimes it could be mistaken for migraines. But anyway, how to find this? So it's a turning muscle, and it turns your neck in the opposite direction that it is. So when I turn my head the opposite way, you'll see this muscle stick out. And when it sticks out, you can grab it and turn your head back to the front and even towards the side, the same side it's on. And then you can take that muscle and pull it and just pinch on it. Now, there's two of them, of course, one on each side, and you don't want to be in between them. So grasping the muscle and pulling it out, you're not going to be on the things in the middle like the jugular vein and the carotid artery. So if you feel a pulse, you're not in the right spot. But when you turn your head and that muscle sticks out, you can grab it. Now you want to be kind of gentle here, because if it's really tight, that muscle is going to hurt, or it can potentially hurt. It's kind of an annoying muscle to have massaged, which is probably why it's much better for you to massage it than going to a massage therapist, because first of all, you don't want to massage it for very long. If you do half a minute on each side to begin with, that's fine, but you want to work up and down, or at least up this muscle, pinching until you find tender spots. And if you're pinching a spot that transfers pain to wherever you're feeling pain, it could be an earache, a headache, or whatever, if it causes that, you're in the right spot. But if you find a tender spot, you can work on it. As the muscles loosen up, as you work on it gradually, time to time, maybe 2-3 times a day, then you can work on it longer. But if you go in too hard, too fast, you may create soreness in there, even bruising, and you're not going to want to work on it too much. But work on a pressure that feels okay, that you're not tensing yourself up. Eventually, these muscles will loosen up, probably within a week or so, depending on how often you're working on it or how tight it was. And where it attaches underneath your ear, you can feel that spot by turning your head back and forth. And some people say, oh, that's a swollen gland. Well, if you can feel it moving under your fingers when you're moving your head back and forth, that's not a gland, that's that muscle. That's the sternocleidomastoid. And usually where it attaches towards the bone, there's more nerves per square whatever than there is in the belly of the muscle, so it's going to be more tender both up here and where it attaches down here. It's called the sternocleidomastoid. So if you turn your head and feel it along the edge of your breastbone, the top of it, where the notch is there, and along the collarbone, you can feel it, and generally it's going to be more tender down there. And again, turn your head in the same direction it is to work on it. And it's a little more effective, I think, working on it than stretching it, because it's not an intuitive muscle to stretch. And of course, do it on the other side. And these muscles also pull your head forward, so if you're doing a lot of heads down stuff or heads down and slightly turn, these muscles come into play. So, as much as possible, try not to work with your head down, but I know that's impossible for a lot of occupations. But do what you can, and then loosen up these muscles. So now we get to the nasty scalenes, and these are the ones that cause all those problems down your arm and shoulder, etc. that I talked about in the last video. So now how to find the scalenes. This is where the sternocleidomastoid comes into play, because you use that as a landmark. So finding that muscle, go behind it towards the outside of your neck, not the inside, because you want to avoid the stuff in the middle. But as long as you're staying on the outside, you're okay. And then push in towards your vertebrae. And you can pull in with your hand, you can push in with your thumb. As long as you're staying behind that sternocleidomastoid, not grabbing your neck from the front, you know, you're fine. And you're not looking for lumps. You're looking for tender spots, because there are some lymph nodes in the front of the neck, and lymph nodes don't have nerves, so they're not going to be painful or tender when you push on them. So if you find a lump that's not tender, you know, just don't work on it. Just look for tender spots. And there are also nerves that go through there, so if you hit something that feels like, oh, that feels like a nerve, well, you know, it probably is. Muscles are full of nerves, but you've got some bigger nerves that go down there. There's 3 sections of the muscles, so if you get between them, you might hit a nerve, and it'll feel like you hit a nerve, so just stay off that. But if you're behind the sternocleidomastoid and pushing towards the neck, and you can go as far as the side of the neck vertebrae there, you're fine. You can also go along the collarbone and find them. And if you got fingernails, it's good to work over top a shirt. Same thing on the other side. Find that sternocleidomastoid, go back to neutral or slightly towards that side, and pull on the scalene muscles. Pull it in towards your vertebrae. Again, if it's really, really tight, go gently at first, and as the muscles loosen up, you can work on them harder. Now there are a number of different stretches for the scalene. This is perhaps my favorite, but there are many different stretches, and they're not intuitive either, and a lot of people just don't get them sometimes at first, but give it a try to figure it out, because a combination of stretches and working on the scalene points themselves will do you a lot of good, especially if you're doing a lot of work with your head down or if you've had automobile accidents, etc. What you want to do is grab your collarbone. If it's your right collarbone, use your left hand. If it's your left collarbone, use your right hand. And just grip that collarbone. Now, if you've got long fingernails, you want to wear a shirt, and if it's really long fingernails, a heavier shirt. So it's because you want to pad so you're not digging your fingernails in, obviously. So, because there's 3 different scalene muscles usually, some people have 4, you want to have 3 different stretches. And the first one, you want to look down towards your armpit in the same direction your hand is, and then pull back away from your hand. And you should feel the stretch right in there. And it's not just pulling back, it's pulling away from your hand with your neck. So get your head down, you're pulling away from your hand, so it's kind of back. The next one is have your head straight and pull so you're feeling the stretch against your hand. Pull back. And the third one is the opposite armpit, and you're pulling back against this hand, stretching it. So nose towards the armpit and pull back away from your hand. I'll just do the other side. So doesn't matter where you start. So I'm looking at this armpit, pulling away from my hand, feeling it underneath my fingers, feeling the stretch underneath the fingers. Head centered, pulling the head away and back. Next one, armpit. You're pulling your head back away from your fingers. And in the stretching section, I've got some other stretches for the scalenes. I like this one, but there's others, and you can pick and choose something that might be better for you. There's another muscle that can cause almost as many problems as the scalenes, and it's a very overlooked muscle. In fact, it's not even mentioned in some of the anatomy books. But it's called the subclavias. It's underneath the collarbone, and it can cause problems in your shoulders, down your arms, into your hands. It can cause similar symptoms as carpal tunnel syndrome, and as I mentioned, shoulder problems, arm problems, whatever. And it's more problematic in people who have rounded shoulders. It can cause problems in people who have their arms forward a lot, like in driving cars or other machinery, or using the computer improperly by having your arms forward. And also people with large breasts, ladies with heavy breasts, pulling that down. The subclavian muscle is right underneath the collarbone. It goes from the edge of the breastbone to as far as you can go under the collarbone until it hits another bony spot. And you're not pushing on the bone itself, but trying to get underneath there. And you can move your shoulder around and find a spot. And when you find a spot that's tender or that produces pain, referred pain somewhere else, that's a spot to work on. And you're also working on the top of the pectoralis major muscle too, and that's okay. But this muscle, it goes pretty much underneath the collarbone. You want to be below the collarbone and then try and push underneath it a little bit, which you're not going to be able to go too far. But again, moving your shoulder around may help you find spots that are tender. And maybe 7 seconds on a spot, or you push in and out or back and forth. Trigger points, they push in and leave it out, push in, leave it out. As a massage therapist, I kind of like to go back and forth, so you can experiment. And if this muscle's a problem, like I said, it can be a nasty one. And it's a muscle that's pretty much overlooked as far as the cause of problems. Another thing that some people have is when they're sleeping on their side, they get numbness in their hands, but not when they sleep on their back. That could be caused by vertebrae in the neck, or it could be caused by the scalene muscles, because when you're on your side, oftentimes you're having that collarbone lift up kind of against your chin, and that collarbone raising up can pinch those nerves going down into your arm. So be aware of that as well. So as I mentioned in the last video, these are a major cause of the pinching of the nerves or the artery or the veins in the front of the chest, and they can cause all kinds of problems down your arm, down your shoulders, into your hands, into your wrist. So don't ignore these muscles. Even though this was a quick video, these are probably the most mischievous muscles in your body. In the first video, in the core videos, which is called Watch This First, How to Tell Where Your Problems Are Coming From, I have a couple tests to tell, where your problem's coming from. A couple tests for, one test for the pectoralis minor and a couple tests for the scalene. So don't ignore that video. It'll save you time working on places that may not be your squeakiest wheel.